So that will be forgot password. Okay, so first thing first, we need to get rid of this. We're no longer passing the ID of the user. And then we also need to get rid of this code here. So right now we need a new input feed for token and also the user's email. So 1, 2, and then we're just going to update it. So this should be email feed, and this should be your email, and this should be email, and this should be test. Here should be email. Alright, so all good with this. I'm just going to grab it and use it to replace this, make it easier to. So this will be token feed, and here will be reset token, and here should be reset underscore token. Alright, so you know the reason why we cannot use token here is because we're already passing an hidden feed which is called token. Right, so this has to be renamed differently. So we have the email feed, and then we have the token feed included in the form. What we're now ready to do is to update the script that is used to process this form. Let's view this first on the browser. Do a refresh here. So we have email, your email address, and then we have reset token. Okay, so this should be 1L. So our next step now is to actually update the script that we use to reset the password when the user successfully go through all the previous steps. That means when the token is correct, the email is correct, and then they have supplied a new password and a confirmed password, we are going to update the password for them. The script is here, should be the one on top, right? So this is password reset bdn. So first thing we need to do here is now include email and token as the required feeds. So the first one will be email, and then the second one will be reset underscore token. So these are now required feeds. So let's try to do a refresh on the form. Okay, so email is a required feed, reset token is a required feed. Let's get back here. Next, we need to grab the input from the form. So we're going to just call this email, then reset this to email. Then I need one more for reset underscore token. Okay, so name this also as reset underscore token. We just need to validate the token. Okay, so that will be the next logical step to validate the token, see if the token is correct. All right, so inside of our try block, come here and say validate email and token. Query going to be equal to select star from password underscore resets where email is equal placeholder email. All right, so before we proceed, it's probably good for us to just verify that the data was actually stored in our database. Okay, so let's come over to DB and then browse on this table. Okay, so we have the data stored here, but then we have a little problem here. ID is 0, means something is wrong with the structure. Okay, so let's come here. Let's make this unsigned. Actually, this is supposed to be a primary key. We did not include the auto increment here. Okay, so that's my bad. Even if you don't specify unsigned, with the auto increment, it's going to actually get the right ID. You see that this has been set to 1 right now because we set the ID to auto increment. We have our expire time here, which is set to 1 hour from the time that we created the string, and then this is the token. So we compare this to what we have in the email, so it should be pretty the same. Okay, so all good. Let's continue with our script. So select star from password reset where email is equal to the email that we grab from the form. Okay, so we are going to just prepare and execute this. We're going to say query statement equal to db prepare. Then we just pass in the query. And then our next step will be to execute the query statement. We're going to say query execute. Then we pass it the array. And then the email. Then semicolon. Okay, so let's check now if we're able to get a value. So we're going to say if role equal to query statement fetch. So if role is equal to query statement fetch, it means that we are able to get a value. Say here email found. Okay, That's step one. If role is equal to query statement, means we found an email. Otherwise, we are going to display an error message. We just say go to and then invalid underscore email. All right, so this is a construct in PHP that allows us to jump to a particular section in our code. We have not yet defined this section in the code, but we're going to define it shortly. So basically, I'm doing this because I don't want to rewrite all of this code for displaying the email address provided does not exist in our database. So I could just copy this and paste it there. It will be the exact same thing. But instead of doing that, I will just say go to this particular place inside of my code. All right, so let's just define that portion. So we want to jump here if the email is invalid. You define this placeholder by specifying the name tag, which is the same as the label, and then a column. So when I come here and say go to this particular place, it's going to actually execute the code inside of this S block. All right, so this is what we do when we don't find any email address associated with the email that the user just keyed in. Next step is for us to actually fetch out the data. So we're going to say stored token is going to be equal to rows token. And then next we are going to get the expire time. So we're going to say expire time going to be equal to rows expire time. Okay, so we could have just checked here to see if the email and the token match using one query. But the reason why I didn't do it like that is when we do that, we are then not able to determine what is wrong, if the email was wrong or the token was wrong. So by breaking it down into various steps, we are able to determine if actually it was the email that was wrong, then give the user the appropriate response or the appropriate message, or if it is a token that was wrong, we are then able to give the correct message. All right, so let's continue. We want to check if the token that was entered into the form matched what we restored from the database. So we're going to say stored token is not equal to the reset token that we got from the form. Okay, so if stored token is not equal to the token that we got from the form, we're going to set our result variable to be equal to flash message, and then we are just going to pass it a string. You have entered an invalid token. Okay, so that's step one of the check. If the stored token is not equal to the reset token, we're going to set our result variable to be equal to this. And then next, we're going to do another check, this time to see if the token has expired. So we're going to say if the expired time that we got from the DB is less than or equal to, let's just use less than. If it is less than date, then we're just going to pass it the format. Okay, m-d h column I column s. All right, so year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. So this is a 24 hours format. So we're saying if expire time that we got from the database is less than the current time, means it's already in the past, which means the token has expired. So we are just going to say your token has expired. This reset token has expired. All right, so that's all the check that we need to do here. So if you notice, this is still the old statement where we are checking with the ID, and now we want to change this to email. So we're going to say email, and then we're going to query the email. Okay, so we are going to use the email as the condition in the where clause, and then here we're going to change this to email, and then change this to email. Update this to rs equals statement fetch. Right, so we can then get the ID now from the statement. So we're going to say rs ID. Okay, so that's all we need to do here. We pass the ID to the execute statement, which everything still remains the same. But I do think there is potentially one issue with this script that we just wrote here. Everything is going to run fine, okay, but the only problem we're going to be having is with our result variable here. If you notice, when there's a problem with the token or the token has expired, what we do is just set result equal to a string. We don't terminate the script here, which means this script is going to continue running. It's going to still do all of this, and then it's still going to change the user's password. We need a mechanism to be able to say when this password will be changed. But before we do that, it's probably better for me to illustrate this on the browser. We're going to use the wrong token. Okay, we use the wrong token to do that, and then you see what I'm talking about. Right, so here is the form. I'm going to fill in the correct email, but I'm going to use the wrong token. Then I'm going to choose a password and then click on reset password. You see here, password reset successful. All right, so this is happening even if we have used the wrong token, and the reason is just because of what I explained to you just now. Okay, actually this is being called, okay, this is being set to you have entered an invalid token, but the reason why it doesn't show is because we keep using this result variable even until the last part of the script. Okay, so everything here goes fine because we're using the same result variable, and I do not want to change that. What I do need to change now is the way that we write the code. Because this is programming, there's always a way for us to say what the program should do. We decide what the program does. All right, so we are going to look at the statement again. Right here, we queried password reset table, and then we execute it here. Here, I'm just going to create a variable. Call this is valid, and then set it to true. All right, so this is going to be like our checker. So this is going to tell us if this statement all succeeded. So inside of here, once we determine that the stored token is not equal to the reset token, we are going to set is valid to be equal to false. So we're going to say is valid is equal to false. Okay, so we do the same thing for token as expired, set is valid equal to false. And then we also do the same thing for invalid email. So is valid equal to false. So what we are now able to do is check if is valid is true. If it's valid is true, then we are just going to continue to do all of this part of the code. Okay, so I'll copy this from the S part, copy all of this until this part, take it out. And then here we're going to say if is valid. Okay, so this is just going to check if the value that we are getting from this variable is true. Only then should you do this. We don't want to do any other thing. That's the only thing that we need to do. If it's valid, is true. Then here, let me just put a comment. If token verification pass. All right, so is valid will be true. Remember, we set it to true here when we initialize it, and then we are checking if the reset token and then the store token are not the same. We set it to false. If the token has expired, we set it to false. If the email entered does not exist in our database, we set it to false and then go to invalid email right here. Okay, so let's now test this out again. Let's start with the invalid email. I don't have any email here called example@yahoo.com. Okay, so token, just put anything. 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. Let's execute that. Okay, so the email address provided does not exist in our database. In order for me to prove to you that the go-to functionality is working, so I will just grab this, okay, so and then put it here. So instead of using the go-to for now, let's say invalid email. Okay, so this is the part that is being called now. Put it again, example@yahoo.com. Okay, and then put an invalid token and then click on reset password. All right, so unexpected equal sign on line 66. Let's see that line 66. Okay, so copied result without the correct variable. Let's do a refresh. We get that string invalid email, which is actually this part of our code. So at this point where we get here, we just use our go-to, right, to go to this part of the code. So it's going to execute whatever we have here in this S block. Okay, so the next step now, let's test the token. We know that our email part is working, validation. We now need to test if the token is invalid. Okay, so here we get a message, you have entered an invalid token. We're going to get the right token now. Come back here, put the right email, put the right token, and then we're going to choose a new password. right? So, and then click on reset password. Here we get updated successfully. All right, so if you notice, we have updated the password, but here inside of our reset table, we still have the token present here, which means the user can still use the token again. There's no way for us to say that you have already used this token or this token is no longer valid or something. So it means that when the password was reset successfully, we should delete this token. Or when this token has expired, we should actually delete it. Okay, so before that, I'm going to just do the test for token has expired. So we're going to set this, backdate the time, and then we come back again to the form support, paste the token, and then try to put a new password. All right, so the reset token has expired. So at this point, what we want to do is actually delete the token because it has expired. The user should actually request for a new one. Okay, so we want to delete the token when it has expired or the user successfully update their password.